What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lithography. Kramzer here with Joe and Jason, and bittersweet episode here as we close out the 1970s. I think what the three of us consider the best decade in rock history. So 1979, here we are. Much like 78, kind of marked by disco kind of running the show. A lot of even rock artists are kind of throwing in a little bit of disco, or at least like the funk of disco, the vibes into some of their work, like Rolling Stones. Rod Stewart has Do You Think I'm Sexy, a huge hit. All of these artists that are just tearing up the charts, like Village People, Anita Ward, Bee Gees, Gloria Gaynor, Donna Summer, they're all in full swing here in 79. The YMCA is born, the dance on American Bandstand, which is huge. But I do think there's, at the end of the year, at least a little bit of a glimmer of hope for rock, as the number one song ends up being My Sharona by The Knack, ending the year and the decade on top. And I do think that because maybe of the generation that is now kind of growing up with really good rock from the mid to late 60s, and now they're kind of pushing back against, this disco attitude that, rock purists hate. Really good episode of Freaks and Geeks where it's like rock versus disco. They show up at a big disco dance contest and yell disco sucks and long live rock and all of that stuff. So if you've never seen that show in general, check it out. But new wave and art rock and punk, and you're starting to get maybe some metal bands forming and about to put out some of their, influential albums. So, a lot of cool new stuff with tech. Steven Stills records digitally. That's pretty monumental. Kate Bush, Joe's love of his life, is now one of the first people to use a wireless mic on stage. Sony's Walkman debuts in Japan, which is going to change how people listen to music. So you got all that going on. And then my beloved White Sox have officially declared war on disco at Disco Demolition Night in July, where they light fires on the field and burn disco records. It's awesome. A lot of really, really good albums coming out this year, too. I would say maybe only 71 and 73 can compete with this. Me personally, it was easy to get my 5 just because these 5 are gigantic in my catalog. But if I had to cross them all off and just do the next 5, it would still be a really good year. A lot of depth to it. And then just quick shout out. I know we don't count live albums here, but this is the year Neil Young's Live Rust comes out, which I consider one of the best live albums of all time. So just wanted to mention that. I am ready to go for 79. Why don't you kick us off, guys?
All righty then. For 79, good year in rock. Lots of kind of on the cusp of making my lists. Highway to Hell by AC/DC, Fear of Music by Talking Heads, Breakfast in America by Supertramp, all sort of on the cusp. London Calling by The Clash. But they did not break the top 5. So my runners-up this year are going to be Tusk by Fleetwood Mac, just a really dirty, messy album. Probably even more so than Rumors, but some really great tracks on that. Really loved the title track, Tusk, with I believe it's the USC marching band, kind of guest appearing. A lot of really kind of hatred between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, which makes for a good album. Also, Led Zeppelin's finale, In Through the Outdoor, recorded at Polar Studios, which was ABBA's studio, so that might explain all the synths. But still plenty of great guitar work by Jimmy Page, especially on In the Evening. And people don't like Hot Dog, but I love Hot Dog. I think it's a fantastic track. There's no weak tracks on the album. A little different direction, but I still think it's a really strong album from them. Kind of a shame that John Bunn would soon die, and that would be the last we'd get from the mighty Zeppelin. Also, for this year, I have Off the Wall, which, Michael Jackson had been around for a while, but this is kind of his breakout, coming out album where he was kind of more in control. Loaded with hits, Rock With You. A lot of the tracks were co-written or written with Rod Temperton from the band Heatwave, which, I don't know, most people probably don't know that, but shout out to him. And my runner-up is going to be Pink Floyd's double album masterpiece, The Wall, just chock full of awesome songs, Comfortably Numb, Mother, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, which was a little disco-y, which the band kind of was wary of, but they caught the disco fever too. But my number one, and possibly my favorite from this artist, it's in the top two, it's going to be Armed Forces by Elvis Costello. The first half of this album is basically perfect. The way it starts on Accidents Will Happen with just his voice, just the way he starts it. Oh, I just don't know where to begin, and everything kind of comes in. I just love that intro. From the moment I heard the song, I was just blown away. Kind of just a different way to start things off. A little shift to new wave. I think the keyboard's a little more, the keys and the synths are kind of dominant more so than in the past. Costello's lyrics are super witty. I guess it's his political album, as he calls it. The sound, the bass playing by Bruce Thomas, just unbelievable. Maybe some of the best ever. Very unheralded, kind of, all the performances are virtuistic. And I love it. I love every minute of it. Just kind of for me, a perfect album, and one of my all-time favorites, and one of my all-time favorites from Elvis Costello. So that is my 1979. The beginning of the Elvis Costello era, basically, for me. It's going to be a lot of him at the top in the preceding years.
Yep, there's going to be a lot of Elvis on my list as well coming up here. I, like you, also have Armed Forces, but it's not my winner. It's one of my runners-up. Also, as a runner-up, I've got You're Never Alone with a Schizophrenic by Ian Hunter. Going back to the Mott years and heading into his solo career, he's been almost an automatic pick for me. This one, I was kind of on the fence about. There's some really great albums, sort of probably more important albums to the history of rock that I could have gone with. Fear of Music was on the cusp for me, but this one's a personal favorite. I really like it. Mick Ronson with him again on this one. Just a great record. I've also got Pretenders' debut. We just did Pretenders Week not too long ago. Love them as a band. Love Chrissie Hynde. Before anyone puts down in the comments that this record came out in 80, it was released in the US on December 27th of 1979. It came out in the UK in January. We're going by the earliest official release date, wherever it may be. So we're counting it for 79. I've also got Drums and Wires by XTC. Just a great early record from them. Making Plans for Nigel is fantastic. I love the guitars on that song. But my number one record of 1979 is going to be Damn the Torpedoes by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He was starting to make some waves with his first couple of records, but this is where he really ascends to superstardom. Great songs, just sort of great American rock and roll, some of the best that's ever been made, and the record sounds fantastic. You have Jimmy Iovine, which he's coming, I think, straight from working on Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. Then he moves on to this, just really continuing his ascension into the upper echelon of music moguls. And you also got Shelley Yakis, who engineered this record, who's, I think, one of the all-time great recording engineers. If you look up his resume, it's like a who's who, and he's worked on a lot of really great sounding records. The drums, especially on this record, are some of the best sounding drums I've ever heard, especially on the opening of Don't Do Me Like That. I think they sound fantastic. But just hit after hit, kind of like the Cars record in 78. It's almost a greatest hits record. It's fantastic.
Good choices, guys. Thanks for clearing up that Pretenders controversy, which I'm sure we would have come across. Still might get some pushback on that. And if it were, I do love that record, and it was in my top 10 considerations here. Not going to make my top 5. Had it come out in 1980, it would have slipped in the top 5. And as far as Tom Petty goes, one of those artists that I really like, but I can never get over the hump into loving. And I don't know why. Like every sort of instinct and how it looks on paper says I should love Tom Petty. I just don't. It's really weird. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm working on it. So my 79 is loaded with 5 albums that I've loved for a really long time, and it was pretty easy to pick a winner and get these 5 and make the cutoff between 5 and 6. So the ones coming up in the rear are going to be In Through the Outdoor by Led Zeppelin. Everything Joe said is accurate. Didn't know about the ABBA studio. That's pretty cool. I do have Fear of Music by Talking Heads as well. I've got Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division. And then I also have The Wall by Pink Floyd. But my fairly easy winner is London Calling by The Clash.
Super.
I don't know a lot of punk. This is my favorite punk album ever, probably because it has that nice range to it where it's not, full on seedy club punk, but the elements are there. It's easily accessible, which is exactly what you would want when you've got such a dynamic voice and message that you're trying to talk about with, Strummer and The Clash in general. It's this huge album that is all about social plight and fascism and people versus government, but it's very musical, very vibrant and energetic. It boils your blood, but also is just, it doesn't overtake you with anger. It's very pleasurable to listen to. If you've seen the Clash discography, this was a runaway Triple Crown winner for us because we kept using the phrase lightning in a bottle, and all the elements of other Clash stuff are on the other albums. Everything just comes together here, which is really impressive, especially for a double album. Really long, but everything's just perfect on here. It's got swing, reggae, 50s rebel sound, hard rock, rockabilly. The track listing's just ridiculously good. It's London Calling and Brand New Cadillac, Lost in the Supermarket, Clamp Down, Guns of Brixton. There's Spanish Bombs. There's so many really good songs on here. And like I said, it's not just a punk album. It kind of transcends all of that, which is what you want. I think some of the best stuff on here vocally is by Jones, not by Strummer, but Train in Vain is amazing. There's not a dull moment on such an earnest, long album. It's really impressive. I can't get enough of it. This was an easy decision. Yeah, I think it's kind of the perfect album to cap the 70s for me, because it's album focused. It's amazing. It's kind of a genre that was not around, a sound that was not around at the beginning of the decade at all, and shows you kind of how far it's come and maybe a little bit of what we can get used to coming up in the 80s. So I'm looking forward to the 80s, like I alluded to before. A lot of my favorite stuff are going to emerge with more of that new wave sound. It is my favorite era of pop music, even though some of the albums won't be up there. For pop singles, I think this is the decade. There's a ton of good stuff. And then, towards the end, you get kind of that college rock radio vibe that I think is awesome. And then that, you start to get the little seeds of grunge happening as well. So I'm very happy for the 80s and some good hair metal stuff. I'm not going to throw that out too. I mean, wouldn't be surprised if some Pyromania got on a list or two. So we'll see. What about you guys? 80s? Not excited? Excited.
I'm excited for the 80s because the biggest thing for me is the 70s are kind of like they're locked in stone. Like there'll be very few changes. I love what I love from the 70s. For the 80s, there's a little more kind of like things out of left field. It's not going to be like dominated by Elton John, Steely Dan, Led Zeppelin for me. There's going to be a lot more kind of variety. So I do look forward to that aspect of the 80s. And I love the synth pop and the new wave of British heavy metal. So there's a lot of stuff for me to listen to.
I'm more intrigued by what it'll be than excited about it. I really don't know what my lists are going to be for the 80s. Like Joe said, I kind of know what I like in the 70s. With the 80s, I don't know as much as I don't know what records came out in which year. So off the top of my head, I couldn't make a list for each year in the 80s. So it'll be a little more interesting to dig into the years and see what really came out in each year and how things stack up.
That's true. It is going to take a little bit more, not digging, but collecting of data. I think like you guys, I don't have that inner almanac or index of okay, yeah, this album came out in 75, blah, blah. It's always just kind of okay, when? Anyway, the timeline gets lost. But I also wanted to mention, towards the late 80s, we're also going to get some hip hop. We'll see how that plays out. It's probably going to be my favorite era of hip hop from 88 to 94. I don't really care for stuff outside of that range. So that could play into things. There's going to be a lot of stuff to look forward to. So thanks for tuning in to the 70s. We are going to have next week a nice little recap of the 70s. We're going to kind of overview the decade, talk about some stuff that maybe we missed or wanted to include, and then some smaller fun lists that we want to get everyone involved in the comments with that as well. So stay tuned for all of the upcoming stuff from Listography. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Joe, Jason, and myself, thanks very much for watching. See you next time.